So Felix is finally back from his month-long break, and as a little celebration, I thought it was about time that I finished his base with all of the new additions that he made, and then do as I've done previously and do my own personal take on it. Now, it made no sense to start from scratch with all of his original builds, so instead I decided to load my previous transformation of his world and start from there, which includes Sven's Japanese house as well as the summer house, which you'll probably see off in the background at some point. Anyway, I started off by making some adjustments to Sven's house before moving on to the actual base. So, first things first, I start by deleting his old house that I previously transformed, as he ends up doing this in his series anyway and ends up making the larger Japanese house instead. I also move IKEA Tower up into the air for later transformation, and finish off by clearing a large flat space in the landscape to make room for the new builds he included. The chicken coop Felix makes for Feige's return and his minions was simple to make. I just spent some time reworking some of the designs, as it was kind of hard to see it from certain angles. Similarly, the same thing goes for his cactus farm inside this little Japanese house. I spent some time working on the contraption itself, ensuring that it worked properly and was actually usable. The house was similar in design to the last one that I just did, and I also included Invar's little prison. I clear a little bit more space in the terrain and reposition it behind the chicken coop. For the Swedish longbow, I again had the same issue with not getting a good view from every angle. He does show it off a few times once built and in a few shots later on. However, luckily I managed to work around that and get things done. I really liked how he added this build into his series, as it isn't housing any necessary survival aspects, he just decided to build it for fun. Which, from a builder's point of view, it's nice to see. I finished off the boat by adding the little ice bridge connecting to the land. Of course, building Watersheep's face, which is the entrance to the Frick chamber, and the zombie pigman face next to it. With the face done, I cleaned out the inside and built his little slot machine system he'd made for his villagers with jobs, which was basically a case of building one cell block and then copying it along. Either way, I then make the love chamber at the end and scatter in other aspects around that gave this room some character from his series. Of course, I had to connect the mainland to Sven's house with this little bridge that he adds, and the ice path alongside, and I also included the little turtle farm next to Sven's house. Back on the mainland, next to the portal, I placed the fish tank he made for Dinnerbone and even added him into his home. Alongside the bridge, I had to add in his crazy roller coaster contraption, which in itself took a while to mimic and get working properly, meaning you can actually ride it, take it underwater, and it connects back to the beginning. So, starting with what used to be his mob farm, he ended up converting that and mixing it into the design of the new IKEA tower that sits atop it. This was the most unique build out of all and was very striking, so I really wanted to do it some justice when it came to transforming it. Also, you'll notice a lot of these later buildings Felix ends up creating all kind of stuck to a Japanese theme, so I heavily took that into consideration when planning the world before transforming it later on. And lastly, I add in his beacon that pierces through the top of the tower. Leaving the biggest for last, it was time to fill in the big space I cleared out with his massive Japanese house. Honestly, respect to Felix for taking on such a big build as this, especially in survival. Building on a large scale in general is difficult, as you really must pull back a lot to get a sense of the scale and see if it actually looks good. Which is exactly why I build in creative, so I can fly around everywhere. Otherwise, this would take quite a bit longer. Again, you don't really get to see this house from every angle, but I think I got most of it there. But anyway, with that done, I think we've just about recreated everything. So things are looking good and also a little bit nostalgic, which is a little weird. But either way, let's see what we can do to transform this. Well, the first thing I wanted to start with was the bridge that connects over to the little island where Sven's house is. And to be honest, I probably spent much longer than intended working on this bridge. But I wanted to make it something that really stands out more and large enough to match the large gap of ocean it has to cover, as I think this would look a little bit weird with a long but very thin bridge. Either way, I looked at some designs of Japanese bridges online and took inspiration from a lot of other smaller traditional bridges, as they all kind of arch over the water. I also make a large supporting section in the middle to hold up the bridge with this almost gazebo-like thing atop it. It was meant to be like a little tower / building amid the bridge, but I opted to keep it very open and basically just a roof. At the end of the bridge, I made what is called, I believe, a torii? It's referred to as a Japanese gate online, and they seem to have them around shrines a lot of the time. Finally, I had to connect the two ends of the bridge together, so the middle is another connecting arch, and lastly, brought the support struts down to the ocean floor. So, when working on the roller coaster, it was really annoying, to be honest. I spent quite a while trying to figure out a way that I could make it how I intended, but making it usable. As you can see, it's got a loop, but that obviously isn't possible in a minecart. And it also makes a jump over the middle of the bridge, and I really wanted to include both of those in the design. I tried everything. Unfortunately, you simply cannot make a minecart jump that length of distance. So unfortunately, no, you cannot ride the roller coaster. Either way, I continued following the same traits Felix's roller coaster had with the underwater parts, and finished things up by lining it with stone and then adding some support struts. Felix's conduit was just the basic design necessary for the survival aspects, which is fair, but I wanted to give it a little PewDiePie flair. So I ended up positioning it on this little island in front of Sven's house, and wanted to make it into the classic Brofist logo. Now, building at this scale and trying to build something organic, especially a hand, was difficult. On top of that, the Brofist logo only has 3 fingers, which made things even more difficult to get looking natural. Of course, the main purpose was to get a 3D looking fist, but I also wanted it to look like the logo from above if you look down. So I kept that in mind while designing it. After a lot of tweaking, I got it looking pretty good and placed the conduit inside the clenched fist, almost as if it was holding it. Lastly, I made the base into the letter P as a plinth for the Brofist statue to sit. One of the smaller sections of the build, but still necessary for a transformation, I deleted Dinnerbone's previous square fish tank and made a more traditional bowl fish tank and decorated the interior with a miniature castle and some colourful coral and fish. Again, another small feature of the base, the turtle pen. But I decided to work on the terrain a little bit more in this area to make it a more interesting path towards the turtle home. I dug out this river that goes through the landscape and made a miniature bridge to cross it. I placed in some manual rocks to skip over as an alternative route to the bridge, and added another torii on a slight angle. Then at the other end of the bridge, made the turtle pen. I kept it simple in design and pretty similar to Felix's. I just decided to make a sheltered section above the water's entrance as a canopy. For the Swedish longboat, I found this design online that intrigued me, so I decided to use that for inspiration, while also putting my own little take on things. Also, because longboats tend to have a face at the end, I decided to make a face for the front but also mimic it to the back of the boat, to signify Jurgen 1 and 2. Using birchwood, I made these 6 oars protruding from either side of the boat, and made a large sail in the middle, keeping that Swedish design of course. Technically yes, the boat is still, so the sail wouldn't be down, but to be honest, I don't really care, and it looks way better like this, so. Finally, finishing off the boat with the Swedish flag atop blowing in the wind. So in the series, he straps the bottom of IKEA Tower with some slime blocks and pistons to carry it off into space. Now I thought of a good way to transform this and include it into the build, and decided to turn it into a rocket. I based the design of this rocket off of the Saturn V, but I've got a few little decorations to top it off. This was also a pretty fun build to do, as I've never done anything like this before. So it was cool trying to make the thrusters out of banners, for instance, and other different blocks, and it was something that I really wasn't used to. Now I've kept the Swedish flag and IKEA logo off to the side there, because I want to add them onto the side of the rocket once complete. Oh, and of course this thing caps out and reaches world height. I finished things off by coming down to the bottom of the rocket and making flames spewing out of the thrusters, with a large trail of smoke following below. Oh yeah, and as a last little trick, I imported the Suki space logos as maps into the game and placed them onto the side of the rocket. So, I guess this is the Suki rocket. Moving on to new IKEA tower, I decided to split and separate the base from the tower itself, as I had another intention for the base structure. So, a few months back on an episode of The Why, someone posted on Felix's subreddit saying that he should turn the mob farm into one of his $3.99 chairs. I decided to do just that. Building this was weird because, well, I'm building a massive gaming chair in Minecraft and that's kind of weird. Anyway, I built the back of the chair up to get the shape and then I cut it out and moved it further away. This wouldn't be a $3.99 chair at such a good price if the back wouldn't lay down. So yes, it can do this. I then placed the tower back on top to finish for now. Because I was kind of limited as to what I could transform for the zombie pigman head, I decided the best thing was to just upscale it and do a version of it standing with its foot on top of the pole, protecting it. Choosing the appropriate colour palette to match this was important, but once I got that down, it was just a case of following the skin design. Either way, with the pigman statue done, I had to give him a weapon. So, by incorporating Tower of Llama, I was able to make a llama trident. Or a trident made of llamas. Because of course, what else would I make a trident out of? So, back to the new IKEA tower. I noticed it looked a little bit big in comparison to the chair it was sat on. So, my first thought was trying to downscale it slightly so that it fit better. I also did my best to kind of mimic the tiers and floors of Felix's tower to kind of keep some of the similarities in the design. You'll notice the same colour palette throughout most of these builds with the Japanese theme, as I wanted to make them all match and work together with each other. This tower has a lot of traits of the smaller towers I placed on the bridge earlier. It's basically just an upscaled version from that. I kept the top of the tower open so that I could place the beacon at the very bottom, and once again, just like Felix's tower, and have it piercing out of the top, changing the colour from yellow to blue using stained glass. Inside the sheep's mouth and into the frick chamber, I started by opening the ceiling and making it glass to let a lot of light in and open things up a little bit. I turned the villagers in their little tower block into a vending machine, kind of similar to that I did for Dan TDM's base transformation. I then neatened up the walls, making it all just smooth stone, and then worked on the sex dungeon. Frick chamber. Of course, I really wanted to make this room extra special for Valentine's Day just gone, so we've got that massive heart at the back with a big old king-size bed in the centre. I then finished things up in here by converting the pile of emerald blocks in the corner into a throne for Pew to sit while watching his villagers work. Transforming the water sheep entrance, I was kind of restricted on what I could actually do for this. I played with a few ideas, but ultimately ended up keeping the design pretty simple and just giving him some arms. It kind of makes him look like he's been run over. Anywho, it was time to work on the main feature here, his new Japanese house. So, I wanted the space to work with, so I decided to copy the building behind and use it as a reference and a guideline to stick to, as well as using some other Japanese castles that I'd found online for the main design to follow. So, I wanted to use most of the materials he used in his build, but I also wanted to match the Japanese style that I was going for with all of the other buildings that he'd done. So I tried my best to get a good blend of both. This castle is stacked pretty high and is made up of many roofs. Luckily for me, it's a mirror design all around. So I was able to work on a section and then copy it around to all corners. Felix's house was massive, so keeping that in mind, I wanted to make it just as big, but I guess vertically instead. I made some tweaks and added in some more wood to make it like Felix's design, and once done, repositioned it into the air and backwards a little bit. Of course, I wasn't going to have it just sitting on a flat landscape like that, so I dug it all out and made it into water to surround the castle, to allow the building to sit on a stone plinth like all Japanese castles seem to do. I then blended it into the terrain and cleaned things up a little bit to make it look more natural. Again, a little bit more terraforming, but it felt necessary. I had to break up the flat landscape and do something with it. So I decided to connect it to the main ocean just next to it with 2 parting rivers, with each building sat on each separate island. Spending some time cleaning things up once again, I then fill it in with blue wool and turn that into water. At the front of the castle, I needed to make some sort of entrance. So I made this wooden doorway with this staggered staircase down the side to match the level of the landscape. It was kind of difficult to find reference images online of any Japanese castles that had an entrance, or a pathway that leads to the entrance at least. So I decided to do this interpretation of it with this bridge arching over the water and connecting to the rest of the base, with the final torii gate at the end. I reused the miniature bridge from Turtle Island over here to connect over the rivers, and scatter around loads of rocks and spikes along the water's edge. I decided to transform the chicken coop into a Japanese shrine for Feige and all of his chicken followers. I found a simple design online and tweaked it to suit my designs. It's got large circle openings on each of the walls to keep a very open plan, keeping to the same colour palette again so that it matches nicely with our castle, and draping banners from the roof edges and interior. And I like how this little shrine house turned out. I went for a similar sort of thing for the cactus house as well, except I tried to pull off the sliding doors with cloth walls look that a lot of Japanese houses incorporate, with this little overhanging balcony outside. Next to the house, instead of Ingvar's cage, I made a little shrine as I thought it fit rather well. And then over by the chair, I fixed up the landscape and blended the wheat with the grass. Last but not least, it wouldn't be complete without cherry blossom trees scattered around to fit the whole Japanese theme. And for once, I'm actually happy with how these turned out. Usually custom trees are hard to get looking good, but I thought that these ones turned out looking pretty natural and definitely an improvement on my part. Anyway, with the trees done, the transformation is complete. I hope that you guys enjoyed this build. This has been requested quite a lot since I did the first part of this a few months back. And that was actually one of the main reasons this channel blew up. So as always, your guys' support is amazing, and thank you for getting me to where I am now. Also, it would be pretty epic for Felix to see this finished transformation, and might even get him back into playing Minecraft again, which is what we all really want, isn't it? As always, you can download this build on my Patreon, which I'll link down below, and put it on the end screen as well. Apart from that, I hope that you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.